we know what the lower limit of like human beings are, right? Like we know like the depravity and levels that people can sink to. Like we don't have any grasp or any way to know yet what is the upper limit on a human being, and that's exciting.
Stripping down.
I don't daydream, I just do dreams. Built the fire, no camping. Imagine your next chapter for uncommon paths. It's the roadmap. With special guests you can learn from, more valuable than a treasure chest. Unlocking knowledge, catch fire, turn impossible to a playground. Difficulties we do them in like a pool table, got holes for 'em. Inspiration, catch fire, find your passion and live for it. Start bold, it gets harder, dig further. Inspiration, catch fire, find your passion and live for it.
Well, we're here with Jeremy Bedenbaug today. Jeremy, it's good to see your face.
Thanks, Simon. Good to see you, man. It's good to catch up after a long hiatus.
We have a few things in common, but one of the main things you might say is currently we both have college football teams that are not doing as well as we might have hoped.
Is that how you had to start the podcast with misery?
Yes.
Yes. I'm a lifelong South Carolina Gamecocks fan. Sometimes I use that as a selling point. I'm like, if you're a Gamecocks fan, that means that I'm faithful, I'm loyal, I'm not going to give up because it's been 40. Well, I'm going to say 41 years because that's how old I am, but it's pretty much since the founding of the program. A lot of heartbreak.
Yeah, and I don't know. We don't have to go down the road of Will Muschamp that much. The head coach that just got fired, but it wasn't. I mean, in COVID, I'm just looking at like an AD. He's either the athletic director. He's either crazy or has a ton of money. Somebody's gonna pony up, like one of the two. So, man, that's a lot.
It's probably both, and my guess is, I don't know. You rarely make a decision like that unless you've got some donors ready to go and you've got some candidates. So my guess is you got Hugh Freeze with what he's done at Liberty, and then you got Billy Napier with the Raging Cajuns, which he's less on the radar, I think, for people, but I think he'd be a prime candidate for various reasons. But I'm sure that some conversations have taken place, and he's not just sort of shooting in the dark here.
Yeah. If it's comforting and all, the athletic director that fired Frank Solich, who was the heir apparent to Tom Osborne, redid some of the indoor complexes at Nebraska right after in this time. And in his infinite wisdom, he was advocating for a red waterfall in the complex. So like waterfall that looked like blood. And that was the wisdom of this man that that fired Frank Solich. So
there you go. I think I've told this before, but Nebraska has always been like my second favorite college team, just because I so admired Osborne and I so loved watching those teams in the 80s and 90s. Obviously they were good before that, but when I was a kid, that's when I was watching them. And I loved watching them run those power formations, man, and just outpower people. It was a thing to behold.
Yeah. I don't know. This is the last thing I'll say about football, but last year ESPN did this college football 150 series of films. And one of the pieces that they did was on strength training. And what I never knew was that the strength coach, they spend more time with the players than the head coaches do usually. I didn't know that a lot of time. And Nebraska had like the premier strength staff until they all got fired, and now they all work at the other big programs. But I just thought that was a good, I'm going to try to pivot here with this, but I just thought that was a good example of like something behind the scenes that people don't see. And I don't know, I could be, barking up the wrong tree here, but it sounds like that's a lot of what you do in your current practice is you're working with the stuff behind the scenes that people might not see as much and really helping people build their leadership and build their teams. Can you talk a little bit about where you find yourself now and what you're doing?
Yeah, man, that's a good way to put it. I like that. Maybe I should have you be my my sales and marketing director. I founded a company called Recreate Solutions, and ultimately, man, I believe that virtually every problem we have is a leadership problem, and often the thing we don't want to look at is it's leading ourselves. which I say is the hardest form of leadership there is. There's an ancient proverb that says, better is a man who can rule over himself than the man who can take a city. So in other words, it's easier to lead an army and take a city than it is to lead yourself well. But if you can master those things and lead yourself well from the inside out, I mean, you can literally you can change the world. You can change everything about your life. You can change everything within your purview of influence and leadership, and grow into the person that the healthiest, best version of yourself. And that's part of what I help people do with their performance, their leadership, their mental and emotional awareness and toughness and resilience. And it's amazing because, I mean, we could tell some stories, but the most amazing thing to me is seeing the impact in people's lives. And it really came out of a big experience for me, as you know a little bit about, but getting to a place where I was leading a large organization, and things were going great until they weren't, because I just got so enmeshed, so burned out, so sort of internally angry. I was, lied to and betrayed by men I didn't think would be capable of doing this thing. And, so you have to kind of descend into the abyss a little bit. And I had to take time off and, step back and resign and really spend a good period of time re-looking at everything, sort of that, mythologically, there's always that archetype, right, of like the desert or the
journey, yeah.
The journey into the dark forest or whatever it is, you know what I mean, which is necessary. But man, so I went through a lot of that, and honestly, coming out of it, my wife said to me one day, she's like, "Babe, it is like you have been totally recreated." And I was like, that's the name of the company, and the gift that I was given is the gift that I want to give other people, other leaders, other businesses and organizations. And that's been the most meaningful. So I try to work really in that transformative space in people's lives and leadership, not sort of just on the surface of things that need to be done.
Yeah. And then just to kind of round out the picture here, that was a lot about how you serve. What audience or constituency do you find yourself serving right now?
All right, it's a good question. So, part of it is, I'm ADHD, and this business allows me to leverage that to the full extent. And I even have a program for ADD leaders. It talks about turning your ADD into a superpower, not into your deficit, because it really can be. And I could talk more about that, but one of the issues is generally I serve leaders and businesses, a few nonprofits. They generally tend to be, I don't feel, people say, what industry do you specialize in, or what size business? And I don't filter by demographic, I filter by psychographic. And so I want to work with people who are fun, they're inspiring, they have some massive challenge or challenges, some need for transformation, some need for change, something that's not working, and they have some commitment to actually look at the hard stuff and get it done. And those are kind of the people I work with. So sometimes there's a few clients now that are kind of like emerging leaders trying to figure out what does it really mean, and how do I kind of find my footing and my voice. Some that are what I call recovering leaders, but I just talked about, you have to go through that process of either you went through burnout or depression, or you got humiliated and fired. And then I work with high performing leaders because what they start to realize is the very things that led them to success at this level are often the things that will sabotage their success at the next level. And so we work on, all of those things. And then I work with culture. So if you have toxic culture, turning a toxic culture into a trust culture. And I've got some great stories about that. But again, the impact, having people come up after me and give me a hug. This is, I guess that one would have been pre-COVID. Nobody's hugged me besides my wife and kids since then. But yeah, give me a hug and just be like, this has changed my life. My husband likes me again. My employees are, in a different spot, and I am too. So Man, it's a little bit all over the place at some level, but it really focuses in the heart of helping people transform themselves and their leadership from the inside out, so that they can, become the person and the leader and have the impact that they were really meant to do.
If you take somebody, and I'll use myself as an example, I'm coming out of school, and I know now that I need to learn more. I needed to learn, and I still need to learn a lot about self-leadership. But you're not focused on that. You're focused on, raring to go, making your mark, stuff like that. And then you get to this point where you start to, outgrow your character maybe, or outgrow your ability to lead yourself. What's the inflection point? Is it crisis? Is it always a very deeply kind of low moment, or where do you find people entering into this conversation?
Yeah. So, usually there's a presenting issue, right? We don't, as human beings, we don't normally like seek out help unless we feel like overwhelmed or stuck or over our skis or whatever it is. But to me, like that's always a starting point. But it's always a presenting issue. One of my core assumptions is when you come to me and say, here's my problem, or here's the issue. I have a core assumption that that what you think is the problem or the issue isn't the true problem or issue. Not to say, so nobody's lying, right? Like you're not like trying to, get one over. You're literally, but generally like, our minds have evolved to be like threat detection systems. And so when we see a threat or a problem, we immediately zoom in on it. And then our mind runs literally like the prefrontal cortex can just do experience simulation over and over and over, right? And you start simulating everything that could possibly go wrong in this scenario. And so whatever we focus on in life expands. And so what happens is you go like, this thing is happening. I got fired. The sales team screwed up. We lost our biggest client. I'm being asked to make a transition. The market's changed and we lost our investors. Whatever's happening, right? Is that inflection point is actually calling something out of you that you're not yet ready to see and hear and pay attention to. And so if all I do is help you on a surface level fix that strategic issue or put out that little fire, it's sort of the same analogy of teaching a man to fish and giving a man a fish, right? So I can hand you the fish and we get that fire put out, and sometimes you have to do it just for triage kind of purposes. But if I can teach you why that pattern keeps coming up in your life again and again and again, and why you have experienced that multiple times, and how to undo that, then you become a killer in a good sense. Like you become unstoppable because you have integrated the shadow side and the dark side of your experiences and your gifts. You've dealt with your past in a way that integrates it into your present leadership and is not dictating it, but is integrated. And then you actually have the potential to create a new future that virtually is unlimited. And I'll tell you, one of the things that's most exciting to me, Simon, is this. We know what the lower limit of like human beings are, right? Like we know like how the depravity and level that people can sink to. Like we know what Hitler did, and like we have these examples. I don't believe we don't have any grasp or any way to know yet what is the upper limit on a human being. The famous story everybody knows, Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile, right? And that was after 80 years of everybody saying it was impossible. What's incredible, it is incredible how he did it, but what's more incredible is how many people did it so quickly right after him. Their skills didn't improve. They didn't suddenly become amazing athletes from before they weren't as good. They literally had something in their brain switch, which went from the 4-minute mile, the sub 4-minute mile is impossible, to now I believe it's possible. And when they believed it was possible, it suddenly was possible. And so there's this idea that I have and that I'm pursuing wholeheartedly with myself and with leaders I work with, to say there is no upper limit on what a human being, or at least we don't know what it is yet. And I'm not saying laws of physics don't apply, or like, you can just jump off buildings, or, anything stupid like that. But just the idea that you don't even have a clue yet who you could be and what you could do if you remove those lids and those limiting belief systems and structures and preordained or pre-built protection systems and things like that. You don't know what your future could be.
Let's take something like exercising in the time of COVID.
Okay.
I had just been getting to the gym well and doing strength training, and then COVID hit, and I am having a heck of a time, finding my home workout options that I will actually do and such. My point is like, it seems like your thesis is that would have some tie to my day job, what I do during the day, how I lead people, because it has something to do with how I lead myself. And I just wondered if you could kind of tease that connection out for us, not just specifically in my example maybe, but just in general, like how do those personal habits and such affect how we show up for other people?
I just was on the phone with a client right before I got on with you, and he's just been offered a promotion. And he said, what I'm worried about is my pattern in the past is when I've gotten a promotion, I have all the way back from like my first, job out of college, right? So going back to your original thing is I get this promotion, and he's like, all of a sudden I almost get like, manic and throw myself into this new job, and I forget to eat and sleep and talk to my wife and take care of myself in any way. And then all of a sudden, like 3 months in, I'm like toast. And he's like, I've done that numerous times. And so we talked a little about that. I said, so, where have you seen it before? Right. And you start, he tells a couple stories. I won't get into all of them. He tells a couple stories, but all I had to say is what kind of came out is, okay, when I'm being offered a promotion, because from my earliest childhood, I have always been scrapping. He's like, I feel like Tom Brady in the 6th round, or getting drafted in the 6th round. I've got a chip on my shoulder to prove that I am good enough for this job. I'm good enough to do it. And we go, okay, that's an important moment, right? Like, and I'm running through summaries right here, but like these are sacred moments, like, because when people go, oh my gosh, that's what happened, when my dad died. When I was 10, and I felt like I've got to prove I can be the man of the house and I can take care of the family. And you realize you've been living out of that voice in many things you've done for a lot of your life. And so now he goes, okay, how do I enter into this next promotion knowing that I have this proclivity to get a chip on my shoulder and prove myself and out grind everyone to the point I've ground myself down, right? And now we can integrate that. You don't do away with it. You actually integrate it, which is different, right? Because there's something there that you needed to learn to see to pull in the positive side of that into your whole being and your whole leadership. And all of a sudden he becomes the kind of leader who makes this transition, and people are like, oh my gosh, thank God he's the guy that got this job. This is awesome. And he's loving and serving people in totally different ways. He's not there to try to prove he's competent or the best, or that, he's here to really serve us. And he shows up in a completely different way to meetings, to tasks, to teams, and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I'm going to head to your website, I think, after this. And so you have me sold. So part of what we try to do on this show is demystify folks that are super successful, because, not everybody gets to the same outcome using the same path. And also, for folks starting off, they see or hear maybe rather on this, Dr. Jeremy Bedenbaug, and, you're talking about reaching the highest level of human potential. And, I just want a job and, some insurance or something like that. So, can you kind of take us through maybe a little bit of where you come from and how you've gotten here?
Yeah. One I would say is, just to that point really quickly, is you don't have to start with, I mean, my goal is not to conquer the world either. You know what I mean? One thing I help people do is define their scorecard, define what success is for you. Because the same way I just described those processes before, I've got a client now. He's a high level executive at a Fortune 50 company, right? And he's like, I'm miserable because, after we get to it, it's like, because I believed the whole time that status and recognition was what I was actually trying to achieve all this time, is a status and recognition. And that was part of my false self. That wasn't really, that's not really who I am, what I'm looking for. So I followed this voice, betrayed my conscience several times, got to this place, right? And I'm like, what the heck do I do with it? So the goal is not to get you to be, the highest paid, highest level. It's really for you to go, what voices am I listening to, and what voice do I want to listen to in order to really get dialed into what my scorecard is and not live by anybody else's. And that might mean that you become a social worker on the south side of Chicago and impact families. So, it's not about gaining status, money, or recognition, but really living the calling that you have. But yeah, for me, and I think it is important to demystify, because a lot of times we look at people, you had Todd Henry on, and we were just talking about that before the show, and he's an amazing guy. And you can look at him now and see all the stuff he's doing, but we don't look at the, 10 years, 20 years that nobody knew his name.
Yeah.
And all the things that he was doing. And so part of what that is instead of going like, oh my gosh, how do I get, you envision your highest goal you can kind of meaningfully like think about, but then you need processes, right? So what are the processes daily? If you ask Nick Saban, like he says all the time, it's like, we don't tell the guys we're going to win the national championship. We tell the guys, you show up 110% on this drill, because like this drill matters, right? So because how you do, one thing is how you do everything is kind of how he says it. For me, I think I told you before, I grew up in like rural South Carolina, kind of middle of nowhere. My grandparents were sharecroppers. Eventually went to work in the cotton mill. My dad started his own business. He started a body shop when I was like 6 years old. And that was the first time I had any, vision of like, what you could actually, do. He had no starting capital, no backers, nobody behind him. I think he was able to borrow, I can't remember, we talked about it. He was able to borrow like $800 from the bank or something. That's all he could get his hands on. And he started this business in a small town, South Carolina, and he built it on hard work and integrity. And those are things that he passed along to me. And I grew up a lot working on farms and hauling hay and picking up like rocks for people and just doing any kind of manual labor I could get, a couple bucks an hour for. And that all came back to, again, it was suffering at the time, right? But it came back kind of in spades later on. But so I kind of ended up doing, again, ADD. I kind of been doing tons of jobs. I could go through like a million jobs that I did. And I did banking and finance and management. I went to seminary, became a pastor, was a pastor for many years. That's where I became the pastor of a very large church. And, but had always been fascinated with leadership and the power of leadership. And so, yeah, so when I got my doctorate, I did executive leadership. I was always coaching leaders on the side. I was always, I had a couple side businesses going, and kind of always had this dream. And I'm a builder creator. So, we went through a huge thing in our church, a big crisis, very large church, and was able to kind of help rebuild the vision, the mission, strategic plan, the leadership team, all that kind of stuff. And it really, besides the fact that I was exhausted, it was kind of like, man, I'm a builder creator, and I want to go create something else, let somebody else kind of run do the maintenance side of it. And that's kind of been a core driver for who I was. So I had the big, as somebody said, like your mess often becomes your mission. And for me, like that definitely happened. I learned a lot about leadership on the job, and I learned a lot about failing when I had to go through that process. And I spent a long time researching all kinds of different fields. So like I again, how does your ADD become a superpower? Like one of it's because like I encompass neurophysiology, neuroeconomics, therapeutic models, performance coaching models, modern leadership theory, ancient wisdom. I use mythology from probably 10 or 15 different civilizations to create, archetypes and things like. So anyway, I mean, it's just I'm bringing sort of all those pieces, synthesize them down into, a couple, an interaction with a client that then can be super transformative. But there's a lot of falling on your face. There's a lot of like making a bold proposal and getting told no. There's a lot of, somebody, I think it was Byron Katie. She said, you can have anything you want in life if you're willing to receive 1,000 no's. So think about that. Like it's generally true. You can have anything you want in life if you are willing to receive 1,000 no's for it. And it's like another guy. I think it was Jim Rohn. I always try to give credit to people, but he said when you receive no as an answer, like this is I need a caveat. Like this is like making a proposal or selling something, right? So I just want to caveat that, like in a very charged climate of Me Too. So when an adult anyone tells you no, yes, but you're trying to sell something or trying to propose yourself to do some work or whatever, and he says, take no the same way your kids take no. It's like your kids barely, like they just blow right through your no. You know what I mean? Like they're gonna ask 7 other ways. They're gonna find a different way around. It doesn't mean there's never a final answer, but if you get one no, I mean 95% of your success is gonna be on the other side of that one or two first or second no. And so developing the skills of perseverance, knowing your story, doing the internal work, and that's the hardest work. The reason it's the hardest is because if you look at the ancient mythologies, right? You go to the Knights of the Round Table when they go to find the Holy Grail and they come up on the forest. It has this crazy line where it says each man determined to enter the forest at the place that was darkest to him. And so it's this ancient idea that the thing we most need is always in the place we're most afraid to look. And what I do is I help people look and not be as afraid because there's a safety there to do it. Did that answer your question, or did that just go off into a total different? If you stop for a minute and ask, you can, if you read Socrates, right, he used to have a conversations with, he called his daimon, right, which is basically what we call our conscience. And he said, his daimon always told him what not to do, never what to do, but what not to do. But the way the human psyche is constructed, for whatever reason, like you can't actually have a conversation with your conscience, basically, and so one thing I'll often ask clients is sort of like back to that, scariest part thing is what are you pretending not to know right now? And if you start to get honest, right, like there are things you kind of know, but you're just pretending not to know them right now, because like you don't want to have that hard conversation. But that problem is like a baby dragon, and it will only grow larger the longer that you ignore it until it finally shoots flame out of its mouth to say, you're going to pay attention to me. And so helping people do that, enter their own forest at the scariest parts, turn over those rocks. Hopefully, I call it slaying the dragons, right? It's like, hopefully you're able to do it when they're small, not when they're massive, but often not.
Another question, and we got to work together for a little bit, and you were infamously known for taking vacations.
Wow, I didn't even know that about myself. Simon.
Oh, brother, you did too. And
no, we still joke about that.
And I wanted to tie it to this idea of boundaries. You've classically, at least from the folks that I've met in my lifetime, have some of the strongest boundaries that I've ever seen. And I just wondered if you'd talk a little bit about maybe how you're feeling about that now, and has any of that changed or recalibrated through your transformations and journey in the last few years?
Yeah, man, it's a great question. Yeah, that did used to be kind of a running joke, is that I would always be, where's Jeremy? What trip is he on now? Where is he? So I would say a couple things is one, like I believe in healthy leadership, and there's extreme, there are wrong extremes on the other side of that, but you've probably seen a study, right? Like NASA proved in the study that if their employees took a 30-minute nap every day, they were like, I don't know, 50% more productive or something like that. I can pull the studies. So I have a saying where I say, necessity is often called the mother of invention, which is true. But if necessity is the mother, then play is the father. And so I can't tell you how many, it's that idea, right? You ever been kind of working on something, and then all of a sudden, like, I don't know, you're just in the shower, and all of a sudden you're like, eureka, right? It's like, oh my gosh, there it is. It's because you finally dialed down your systems that you would put on edge, right? To like, you're generating all this cortisol and adrenaline and noradrenaline, and your body doesn't make great decisions out of those things. Your body does a good job of fighting and freezing and running, and the whole fight, flight, freeze, metaphors, which is oversimplified, but you get the picture. And so when you give your mind that reprieve, it allows the space for generation, a lot of extra creativity and generation. And so I even have a thing. I did a 21-day leadership challenge I told you about before, and one of the days is called go play. And I talk about becoming a kid again. It's not that we don't stop playing because we get old. We get old because we stop playing. And that idea is big. But for me, like boundaries, I've seen so many leaders burn out because they I just have that propensity to be a workaholic. Like, I told you like how much my dad worked. I mean, my dad would get up at 4 a.m. and, he would come and take us to school, and then he would go and work on his stuff, and he would work till at least dinner time, and he'd come home, and then he would, do books at night, and just, and I have that propensity just to be kind of crazy. And one of the things I promised my wife is like, look, I will set boundaries around my life so that I will only be gone on average one night a week. I will take all my vacation, and I'll be with you and the kids when we do it. And I won't be the guy that's going like, oh, 70% of your vacation is still, in pat because you believed. And part of it is actually, like, I think it's important for our egos, because I tell leaders all the time, I don't have time. I can't ever get away. I have to get up and get right on the phone in the morning and start responding to people and start responding to my email. I'm like, one, why do you let other people dictate your day and your priorities? And number two, who told you were that important? Because when I start believing that, like, if I'm away, everything falls apart. Well, if that's true, then I've been a terrible leader. And if it's not true, I'm overinflating like my sense of importance. And if it is true, I've simply diminished my people, and they're not able. So part of it is to let people have a little bit of, one, boundaries in my own life, but two, to go like, I wanted people to have a little bit of like trial by fire, but like there's a safety net, kind of like, hey, I'll be gone for 2 weeks. Don't call me unless it's a crazy emergency. And people freaked out about that, because we were in a culture, at least early on, that like you didn't do that. And so being able to keep that promise was good. And what I missed in that, I'll say this, is because I was so good at some of those boundaries, and I would come home at, I'd be home at 5:30, 6 every night. And but what the boundary I did not understand was again, back to that those old emotional patterns, right? Is my need to overfunction, to fix, to be uber competent, to take on whatever the situation is, to take on responsibility for everyone else's emotions and tasks. And so burnout doesn't, I mean, if you're in a West Virginia coal mine, it does, but generally, like, it doesn't come from overworking. It comes from overbearing, from taking on responsibilities that aren't yours to bear. And so, and I call that stealing the problem, and so you overfunction, right? I tell leaders, like, why do you keep heroing your people? Why do you keep rescuing your people? Well, I got to help them. And then it's like, is it helping them, or are you actually stripping their dignity away? Because I can help you, I can serve you, I can coach you, I can lead you, but I don't take what's yours onto my back and then pretend I'm doing you a favor. And that's something I did for years, which eventually led to my, burnout. Is that, when there was a problem, and my wife would say, Jeremy, when there are forest fires, and she's like, you throw yourself on these forest fires, and it's amazing. You're able to, like, put the fire out and then turn it into, like, a nice little votive candle and hand it over to people. She's like, but the problem is, like, over time, like, you can't throw yourself on that many forest fires without getting burned yourself. And I couldn't quite compute in my own head, because I had those boundaries that you talked about. And I would say to her, babe, I'm not overworking. I'm home. I'm taking my vacation, things like that. And she would say, you're right. I can't, like, poke holes into that, but you're not totally present with us. Like, your head is somewhere else. And it was because I was spinning around, taking on everybody else's, responsibilities. And so I ended up creating, kind of from conversations with my counselor, what I call the 2 circles that saved my life. And I created a resource for it now. And it's really like, the inner circle is responsibility, the outer circle is concerns, right? And it's kind of like, whenever we take things that we're concerned about, and rightfully so, you're concerned about your kids, your job, the economy, what's happening in the presidential election. I mean, those are all things to be concerned about. But what are you responsible for in those things? And where we burn out is we start to expand that responsible circle. Is like, I'm taking on, so I don't want to share something with my wife because she might get, it might make her frustrated or upset or whatever. It's like, when did it become my job to manage her emotions? It's not my responsibility to manage her emotions. It's my responsibility to love her, to tell her the truth, to share my heart with her, to show up with her, to be present, to own whatever failures I've had in our life, in our relationship, our marriage, right? But managing or anticipating and trying to manage her emotions, and I would do that in leadership, because of various reasons. I could actually anticipate what everybody's response was going to be, and I would just fix it all before it ever happened. And I would be like, see, we're all good here, guys, and expect kind of a pat on the back. And over time, it was kind of like, you don't realize, we keep picking things up and putting them on our backs, and we don't even realize how many things we're carrying until something happens to show us. So
yeah. Well, and even you talked about play. One of my favorite memories about you is we were leaving an event one night and it was raining. I don't know if you remember this. And
I totally do.
And I don't know. I think I was being very judicious in my steps, trying not to get wet. And you said something to the effect of, "There's been a study that proves that you get less wet when you run," and you just took off to your car, and it was super playful and one of my best memories of you. So.
Yeah, I think I said that while I was, like, sprinting by you, yelling back to you in the rain, and like,
yeah.
Simon, and it is true. Though I read it recently. I was like, a study shows you actually get wetter if you do that.
Because it's like it almost doesn't matter exactly, because of you're gonna get wet either way, but just the fact that you had a study and everything like that, and in the moment, like, it was good. So just in that spirit of play, I mean, there's a lot of stuff we talked about, a lot of emotional stuff, a lot of heavy stuff. But I mean, people that are looking for their first gig or come out and graduating, I mean, they're coming into more uncertainty maybe than ever in our world. What words or thoughts would you have for them as they're starting their adventure?
One, I think that's a good word, is adventure. And mentally, how you label something. You don't get to determine what happens to you in life. You get to determine the meaning you ascribe to it. And so when, hard things happen or negative things happen or challenges in front of you, you could describe it as, the thing that's going to cost me my business, or you can describe it as the thing that won't let me have what I want to have, or you can describe it as an adventure. You could describe it as, I don't know if this is the Stoics or if this was more Eastern, but like the obstacle is the way kind of thing. It's like when the obstacle is the way, and when the obstacles come, like that's a puzzle, it's a challenge, it's an adventure. And so if you just look and go like, there's no prize of I'm going to get to this destination and then like everything's going to be perfect. It's like, no, actually enjoy the moment, enjoy the struggle, enjoy figuring out who you are and who you're not. Make it an adventure. Invest deeply. I would say invest deeply in relationships with people, and with people that will love you and support you and also tell you hard things. Don't avoid that, because if you're like, oh, I'm just going to grind to the top, you'll get somewhere and you'll turn around and be like, what was this all for? It'll also teach you how to lead people, because you'll actually know people. And then I think the future belongs to people who are comfortable with complexity and able to navigate uncertainty and sit in the midst of those things. So like you said, we're in everything's changing all the time. I mean, before COVID, everything was changing all the time. And now, and so the future belongs to people who can be comfortable in complex, what I would call off the map leadership. You know what I mean? Like we can train you. You can be trained for like leading on the map. You know what I mean? Because like, oh, here's the map. Here's how you go from A to B to C. But something's going to happen in your life personally, or in the world or the economy or your industry, and all of a sudden you're going to find yourself off the map. And for the people who have grown comfortable with sitting with like themselves in like, what the heck, this uncertainty, like who am I, what am I really thinking, feeling, needing right now, and people who are able to sit with other people, and not just jump in and steal the problem, not just jump in and rescue, not just jump in and blame someone. Those are the people I believe the future belongs to them, both in like life and meaning, and both in leadership and success and whatever that they're trying to do. There's a quote by Ed Friedman, and he says, the leader, because you're like, there's always a leader by title, right? But he says the leader is the person in the system not blaming anyone.
Whoa. Yeah.
And notice, like, it's very carefully worded. So if you want to be a leader, be the person in the system. So that means you can't be on the outside looking in and going like, oh, well, that guy, cheap seats. You have to stay connected to people and to the organization, even if it's being critical of you, even if it hurts. But you're the one in the system not blaming anyone. And if you look for that person, you watch a crisis hit, you look to be that person and you look to find that person, that will be the person who actually ends up leading, regardless of the title or the pay structure or whatever. And so I would be telling people to do those things. There's so much free education, skill development online. You can do that, but can you be comfortable in crisis, in complexity, in uncertainty, and be the person that in the moment is going to stay in the system but not blame anyone? And all of a sudden, people will be following you and trying to figure out how to utilize you and all that kind of stuff.